Hooks and cords. Hooks and cords are energetic connections that are formed when someone or something penetrates a soul's energy body in order to control them and to draw energy from that soul. This is very different to compassionate connections that are formed when we or our client offers our vital force energy to another. Hooks and cords are not formed with permission. They are formed in order to draw energy from you and to control you at some level. This type of energetic penetration usually takes place between two people and can be used by positive souls as well as a common tactic from negative souls. It can also be formed between a soul and either dark forces, entities, or negative beings. These connections do not need you to be anywhere near them physically, and I often find people with hooks and cords from people who are not even in their lives anymore, although they still feel an emotional charge from that person if they think about them. So just because someone is not in your life anymore, or just because you can't see the entity or negative being in front of you, it doesn't mean it hasn't got a hook or cord in you. I'm going to break both cords and hooks up and talk about them separately. Cords. Cords can be used by positive and negative souls as a way of receiving vital force energy from another positive soul. A negative soul would not receive hooks and cords as they don't generate their own vital force energy. They can also come from negative forces such as entities and negative beings. The most common situation I see on a more regular basis is clients that have been courted by family members, such as partners, parents, friends, from children sometimes to the parent, from co-workers and even bosses to employees. Cords are created from the originator and will form out of a chakra from which the energy is coming from. If it's a male partner who wants to control his girlfriend or wife because he's scared of other men finding her attractive and he's worried she will cheat on him, then he would create a cord from his second chakra. That is the chakra that deals with sexual energy. And he'd cord her in the second chakra as well, just to drain her sexual energy so she's less attractive and less sexual. This is very common to find in relationships, but unfortunately it always ends up backfiring on them because she now has no sex drive and the relationship becomes even more toxic. So this is a very common thing that I see really regularly with relationships. Cords in relationships are so common. Now I'm using a male courting a female as an example, but it's females court males just as much as well. So, you know, like I said, cords from the originator, the person who actually forms the cord, depending on their intention, it depends on what chakra that cord will come out of. Now, if a man is afraid of his partner cheating on him, or if she's really like, you know, sexually, you know, open and gets lots of attention from other males, sometimes the originator of the cord will, because it's all about sex and about sexual energy, then the cord will come out of his second chakra and cord her in the second chakra. So it's the second chakra is all about sexual energy. So the cord, it wants to drain her sexual energy, so she's very low vibe sexually and therefore won't be attractive or attracted to, you know, anyone else. Now, that does help control her sexually, but what happens is because he's siphoning all of her vital force energy, especially from that chakra, what happens is she will lose her sex drive, and then all of a sudden he's not having anything like that either. He's not getting that anymore, and it creates a lot of toxic, you know, stuff to happen, you know, and it continues to get more and more toxic. So sometimes people cord others through their heart chakra, and sometimes they cord them from their third eye, they can cord them through their throat. Like, it depends on the intention of the person who's doing the cording and what they're trying to control in the other person. If someone's trying to control someone else's self-expression, then the originator might have the cord coming from the third, which is the solar plexus, all about power. The originator might have it coming from the third chakra and might cord the person in the throat chakra in order to try and, you know, suppress self-expression. So it's very, very interesting how it plays out. Attaching mechanisms. Most cords are inserted easily if we haven't got strong energetic boundaries, and at this point in our evolution, I don't think a huge percentage of people have this right now. Strong energetic boundaries are formed when we clear up our inner worlds and clean out the shadow parts that keep us susceptible to these kinds of attachments. And because cords mostly attach to chakras, other attaching mechanisms is having an unbalanced and weak chakras as we become easier targets. The more conscious we become and the more self-love and self-care and true inner work, we become more and more sovereign and we can be untouchable in these ways. So a lot of the attaching mechanisms all come down to the fact that we have so much, shadows going on, and in the shadows, this is where this energy can, have all the attaching mechanisms. So all of the attaching mechanisms for any negative energy all comes down to how much we've cleaned up our inner world and how much we've cleaned up our energy bodies and taken responsibility for them. So this is a massive process, and it's one that I really don't think many people on the planet are really at that level. So it's just a process that we're moving towards. And in the meantime, we have to just be aware that there are a lot of attaching mechanisms within us. And anyone who claims to be a sovereign being right now, it's kind of like, it's not really, like I said, I just don't think that there's many people on this planet right now who are truly, truly sovereign. There may be a few, but there won't be many. And if they are truly sovereign, they will be living the most incredible lives, because when you're sovereign, you can create at a very high level. So just be aware of people who throw around sovereignty and how sovereign they are. It kind of means that there's a lot of shadow that they're not looking at just yet. Now, to go into a more finer detail of the attaching mechanisms, we're going to look at the different types of cords that can be looked at and the attaching mechanisms behind it. Attaching mechanisms between two souls. So number one, cords between two positive souls can be created with love mixed in with fear. For example, I had a client who'd been courted by her sister who she was close with. Out of love, she was really concerned for her little sister starting university because she thought her little sister was too out there. Now, her little sister did have bright pink dreadlocks and piercings, and her older sister was very straight and conservative. So you can understand that the straight and conservative older sister was a bit concerned about her, kind of over out there little sister going to university and getting judged. So out of love, she created a cord from her heart chakra that corded her sister in the 5th chakra, her throat chakra. The reason it attached to her throat chakra is because the older sister's unconscious intention was to block or lower her sister's self-expression. So it attached to her 5th chakra as it governs self-expression. Number 2, cords between a positive soul and either a positive or negative soul can be created out of the need to control the other. So for example, a male partner who wants to control his girlfriend or wife because he's scared of another man finding her attractive and he's worried she will cheat on him, then they could create a cord from the 2nd chakra, that is the chakra that deals with sexual energy, like I said, and cord her in the 2nd chakra as well, just to drain her sexual energy. So like I said, she's less attractive and less sexual. And I find these kinds of cords are much bigger and more toxic than the ones that are made from love and fear. These kinds of cords are not from love, as the person creating them doesn't know what love is from an unconditional sense. They only know what controlled love and conditioned love is, and that is far from the energy of real divine love. The more controlling the originator of the cord is, and the more disempowering the cord will be to the target of the cord. Number 3, cord between a positive soul and a negative soul, and created for the negative soul needing vital force energy to survive. Now, negative souls can feel when someone has a weak energetic boundaries and weak sense of self, and will easily create an opportunity to cord the person. Usually the person will feel like they just got baited into an argument or baited into saying yes when really you wanted to say no. The feeling of being baited before the cord can sometimes be the indicator that a cord is trying to reel you in before the cord attaches. Now, this particular cord, when it's coming from a negative soul, what I find when it comes to negative souls courting positive souls is there's usually the feeling of being baited before the attachment. Now, this doesn't happen with the 2 types of cords I just spoke about earlier, although it can kind of happen, but I find that the feeling of being baited before a cord is attached is usually from a negative soul trying to bait the person into cord. It's almost like going fishing, the negative soul's just fishing, and they can kind of gauge when someone has weak energetic boundaries, and they will try and bait them into a situation where the cord can attach. So, saying yes when you mean no. Those types of things allow energetic connections. When you go against when you go against your own truth, you basically leave yourself wide open to attachment. So it is another really good reason why you should always speak your truth, because when you go against your truth, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with a positive soul or negative soul. When you go against your truth and you say yes, but you really mean no, that does leave yourself energetically open to sort of, attachments. So when it comes to a negative soul, they really do this a lot. And whenever I've found myself working with people who have been courted from negative souls, they will say to me, I can feel the person baiting me. I felt that happen. So it's very interesting. So now I want to look at the attaching mechanisms between a positive soul and darker forces. Now, cords between a positive soul and darker forces are created from some kind of interference, hack, or distraction to allow the connection. Once again, these darker energies can feel when someone has a weak energetic boundaries and weak sense of self and will, and this is all they need to cord someone. These cords are usually formed while asleep or in a moment of unconsciousness and not being fully present. This is the state most people still live in. This is a very common thing to find, as most people can present with many cords if they have been unconsciously living their lives. They are intended to feed off vital force energy and sometimes to stop a soul from activating or stepping into their path. So cords with darker forces, I've wanted to kind of separate this one, and although cords from negative souls, you could say still are, negative forces, but I wanted to kind of separate them because there is a difference. When we have negative souls, courting us, that's done in a different way. It's done, kind of by the interaction or whatever's going on with them. When we have cords from negative forces, this is usually formed while we're asleep, and it can be formed while we're awake, but it's not through a person. When I talk about cords with darker forces, it means that it's not from an incarnated soul, negative or positive. It's just, energies. So either negative beings or entities. That's what I mean by darker forces in this particular instance. So I find, like I said, while we're asleep, that can happen if we've got weak energetic boundaries and if we've got a lot of shadow stuff going on. And it also happens while we're awake, but while we're asleep, while we're awake. So how often in our day-to-day lives do we just unconsciously go about our day? Right? You think about how often you can drive without even being fully present. You don't even remember driving through the lights or whatever. We go on autopilot. And we do that when we've got a lot of routine. And most people have a routine. It's like Groundhog Day, right? So most people live the same life over and over and over again every single day with the same routines, the same people, the same things, the same TV shows, the same everything, right? A lot of people live Groundhog Day. Now, in Groundhog Day, in that unconsciousness, when we are not fully present in the moment, like fully awake and present in the moment, this is when negative forces can create interference. They can cord you, they can do all sorts of stuff. So if you are not present, it means you are not awake at the driving wheel, at the steering wheel. If you're not awake at the steering wheel and you're not steering your life and you're steering your body and fully conscious of what you're doing, if you're not awake and holding that wheel, some other energy will happily do that. Now, that's not always darker forces from the outside. Sometimes when we're not consciously driving our own vehicle, sometimes it can be parasites driving the bus or the vehicle. 99% of the world's population have parasites. And as I spoke about when it comes to parasitic entities, these things have consciousness. They are a conscious entity. They're consciousness. And now you can read about the consciousness of parasites and it will blow you away how conscious they are, and science confirms it, right? So even when we have parasites or bacteria or viruses in our body, which we all do have, these things have their own consciousness. So sometimes we can get cravings for food, and it's not actually our craving, it's the parasite's craving. So we have a lot of different consciousness going on in our body. It's not just our consciousness. And then you have the reptilian brain, who has its own consciousness. So we literally, when you think about it, we are divine souls that come down into this vehicle, and it's supposed to be that we are the divine being consciously driving the vehicle. But unfortunately, because of all the choices over lifetimes and lifetimes and the hacks and all that sort of stuff, we have now become like a vehicle that doesn't just have a divine soul in it, but has all these other things going on that has its own consciousness as well. Now that's the reason why you can say, damn it, I'm going to do this. I really want to create this in my life. I'm going to create that, and then not create it, because you want to do that. Your soul wants that. Your consciousness wants that. But does it happen? Do you create the life you want? Hard, isn't it? Because all the other consciousnesses that are going on inside of us, taking us out of alignment and hacking and draining us. So, it's an interesting thing. Now, in saying that, I definitely do not want anyone having a freak out about that. Like, don't think too heavily into that. Although, it's going down a wormhole for sure when you think of how many consciousnesses are in our system. But it's just a part of the evolutionary cycle, you know what I mean? It's part of the process, it's part of the awakening, if this wasn't going on, then we wouldn't be spurred and wouldn't have the motivation to actually keep ourselves awake at the steering wheel. Do you know what I mean? So this is a positive thing, really, you know what I mean? Like, we're being forced to wake up. We're being forced to spend more time awake at the wheel. So it's just part of the process. So I think it's fascinating. So basically, most cords with negative forces can be made while asleep, but at the same time, just as easily made while awake but asleep at the driving wheel. The results in a person. Cords are fairly passive when they first form, so they don't cause a lot of disturbances straight away, although it depends on the originator of the cord. But once the cord has been locked and secured into place, the siphoning of vital force energy will start and get more constant. To look at the results in a clearer way, I'm going to break them down so we can address each type of originator, as that determines how the cord is used and the results. If the cord is attached to another positive soul and formed from love and fear, then the cord will create a blockage within the person's chakra the cord is attached to, and create that chakra to slow down the flow of vital force energy, and this blocks authentic expression and flow in that area. When first attached, the person will often feel a slight sense of distraction within their thoughts about the person when first being corded, such as having them on your mind more, or even maybe feeling a bit worn out by them. Depending on what chakra the cord is attached to, depends on how this will show up in the person's life. These cords are the ones that are more likely to dissolve on their own if the originator of the cord relaxes their intentions. So if the originator of the cord is a positive soul, what I find normally is these cords aren't that severe. When a positive soul cords another positive soul, I usually find that the cord will dissolve on its own, usually, if the person doesn't keep up the intention. But while saying that, it still does happen, because sometimes a positive soul can still be somebody who really abuses their wife. Now, they might be a positive soul in the record, but they're backing up a lot of negative energy. So, a very nasty person who bashes their family and wife can still be a positive soul in the records, but it will be getting close to being a negative soul. So, there are spectrums of positive souls. You have positive souls that are really, really positive and like are really, really in the light and really, really positive. And you can have positive souls in the records who are more on this side of the spectrum, getting close to being a negative soul. So, just because someone's a positive soul, it doesn't mean that they're not bashing their wife or their husband. It doesn't mean they're not abusing somebody else or raping. These are the things that we've got to remember, okay? Because positive souls still have complete free choice of how they act and what they do to other people. It takes time of negative choices. The more negative choices we make over our lives, or the quicker it is to turn into a negative soul. What I find normally though is that people who are abusing their family, or they're bashing their wife or bashing their husband, or they're raping or things like that, normally someone's not a really good person all of a sudden turned like that. It's usually characteristics that have been quite consistent throughout their whole life. But I just wanted to make you aware that there is a spectrum, okay? So you can have cords between two positive souls and yet find out that the really terrible stuff's going on between them, and that this person might be really abusive, and you think, well, how can they be a positive soul? To become a negative soul in the records, your complete energy body, as massive as it is and as multi-dimensional as it is, you have to make enough negative choices to basically have the majority of your energy body, the majority of your choices being negative. So it's not like someone, if someone does something like rape someone or murders somebody, and yet they haven't had any other they haven't had a huge amount of negativity before that, and they do something like that doesn't turn them into a negative soul instantly. Okay, so there's all these types of extremes, spectrums that we can, operate within. So I just wanted to make that clear. So when it comes to positive souls being courted from another positive soul, what I normally find, the normal average person is a good person. They might actually have some shitty characteristics, but normally deep down, most people who are positive souls usually do kind of the right thing by people, in the spectrum of really negative and really good. Most people, kind of sit in the grey area. They can be really good, but they can also be a little bit shitty, but they're not extremely bad. Do you know what I mean? They don't go to that extreme. So what I find with those kind of situations is that these cords can sometimes dissolve on their own over time, because the person who's a positive soul might cord someone with an intention, but the intention might not last for long. In 3 weeks' time, that person might have let that go. It might take a few months. But usually, sometimes it's only a few days and the person has directed their thoughts somewhere else. So these types of things can clear up on their own. But then you're going to have a lot of clients who come in, and you'll find that they've been corded from a positive soul, but that cord might have been there for years. So it doesn't always dissolve. But these ones are the highest possibility. They have the highest possibility of dissolving. That's what I'm trying to say. So it doesn't always happen, but it does happen if the person changes their intention and focus. If the cord is between a positive soul and either a positive or negative soul, and formed out of the need to control the other. Now, once this cord is established, it will start stealing as much vital force energy as possible out of the chakra it is attached to, in order to buckle the person in the chakra targeted. If someone wanted to control another person's path in life, they would cord them in the 6th chakra to block them from accessing their path, so are easily controlled. I've also found mothers who cord their sons in the heart chakra in order to control their love life, almost like claiming their hearts as their own. Over time, the person could give up all willpower and just become a puppet on a string, as the saying goes. Being drained so heavily of vital force energy will create chakra imbalances, and depending on the chakra, this will present in many different ways, from bad experiences, intense out-of-control feelings, and physical health issues, just to name a few. So when cords are formed from either a negative or positive soul, and it's based on just controlling the person, so there's no love or anything else involved. It's just a positive or negative soul with the intention of controlling that person. Then these cords are the ones that, they attach and they start siphoning really quickly. Where the cords I spoke about before from a positive soul, that's more got to do with love, like those cords don't siphon energy as quickly. They're more passive. Where if a positive or negative soul cords another positive soul and its intention is just to control, these things do siphon quite quickly. So the person can start to feel quite drained quite quickly. Now, the main thing to remember is cords that are made from love and fear, from a positive soul to another positive soul, and it's formed out of love and fear. Those cords are going to be a lot more passive in the way that they drain their vital force energy, and the results in the person are going to be, less full on than a positive or negative soul that cords another positive soul out of the intention to control. When somebody's doing it just out of control, the cord becomes a lot more intense and the siphoning becomes a lot more intense as well. So it's really important to understand that, the love and fear compared to just control has a huge difference on the results in a person. And when it comes to someone, a negative or positive soul, cording another positive soul out of just the intention to control, the intention is to buckle the person in some way. It's to actually cripple them in some way, depending on which chakra the cord attaches to. So the intention of the originator has a huge decision on how it all plays out, but the end goal is to somehow buckle the person in order to control them. So, it has a very different intention to someone who cords someone out of love and fear. If the cord is between a positive soul and a negative soul, created for the negative soul to feed on vital force energy to survive, then this cord will start to drain the positive soul quite quickly and health issues will start showing up fast. Chronic fatigue and other energy issues are the first signs, and then depending on the chakra it's attached to will depend on other issues experienced. The originator of the cord will feed as fast and as hard as possible and then close off that cord once vital force energy becomes slow and leave the person usually in bed or in hospital with an undiagnosed mystery illness that can leave the person in a health crisis for a long time while they try and rebalance their energetic system and chakras. Although they close the cord down once they have had their feeding frenzy, the cord will remain, and whenever they want to open it again, they can. That's why clearing them can help the person recover if they haven't already, as the cord is still an energetic interference within the chakra just by being there, and removing it will help the chakra rebalance easier. Okay, so if the cord is from a negative soul and the intention is it's to survive, it's to get vital force energy, it's to feed. So a negative soul who has enough vital force energy that it's feeding from, but it wants to control somebody, that cord is still going to be, pretty toxic. But if a negative soul is hungry for vital force energy and is, hungry, then when they cord someone, they're not cording them with the intention to control them, they're cording them to feed, like to survive. It becomes a very intense connection. It's a very intense cord. That negative soul will have a feeding frenzy, feed as hard and fast as possible. The person's completely drained and buckled, and like I said, usually ends up in bed or in hospital with some mystery kind of illness. And that's the intention of the cord. The cord is a feeding frenzy. Now, that the negative soul will shut the cord down once the vital force energy starts to slow down and they know they've actually siphoned all of the vital force energy from the chakra the cord's attached to. They'll close that cord down, but they can reopen it at any stage. So it's almost like having all these cords, around the place that they can start tapping into when they're hungry again. The problem is when they drain someone so badly, they know that that person's not going to be useful for a very long time. So the chances are they're not going to come back and try and feed again in a short amount of time. But what I find is with these types of cords, it can be maybe every 2 or 3 years somebody goes down with some mystery illness and they can't figure it out, but it's really just a negative soul who's got a cord in the person, and they know roughly every 2 or 3 years the person will have enough vital force energy again to tap into and drain again. So sometimes people can have, bouts of mystery illnesses where they have a pattern of, every 2 or 3 years or even every year, have some sort of weird thing that happens where they're just bedridden, they're completely exhausted, and they have chronic fatigue for the next 3 or 4 months afterwards and have to kind of like balance themselves back up. So these types of things are very common when it comes to negative beings that are hungry, and you just happen to be a family member or friend or something like that. So just to be aware of the differences between a negative soul who cords you out of control is still very different to a negative soul who cords you in order to feed from you because they're hungry and starving. If the cord is between a positive soul and darker forces, then this cord will slowly use vital force energy, while the negative entity, being, or energy also uses hooks in the person in order to run programs for control. The hook is usually put into place before the cord when it comes to darker forces. Once the hook and cord is in place, it's easier to drop the sinker whenever they want to take the person down. We've all heard of the saying hook, line and sinker. Well, this energetic technique is not only used by darker forces, but even positive people get caught in using these energetic tactics. I see this all the time with marketing, especially those who study different types of mind manipulation or underground marketing in order to sell. They are often using these energetic tricks just with a different intention, but the energetic mechanics are still the same, and this is why people who use these tactics can end up trading with negative forces unconsciously, because they're already using out of alignment techniques and are easier to cord because of it. Once the cords and hooks are operating, the entity, energy, or negative being or energy will start controlling the person to carry out whatever agenda it has, or they can stay operating very slightly in the background until needed. So when it comes to cords from negative forces, like I said, I usually find that there's a hook with the cord when it comes to negative forces. And when I said hook, line and sinker, most people have heard of that saying, oh, he got me hook, line and sinker. And this is an energetic technique used by negative forces, but like I said, positive souls use this as well. So when you think of the saying hook, line and sinker, that's basically somebody fishing, right, to catch something. So if you, to catch a fish, you have to put the bait on the hook and the hook's on the cord, right? So when it comes to negative forces and negative beings, there's always some sort of bait that they kind of put on the hook, and then they kind of, and that's on the cord, the hook's connected to the cord, and then they kind of go fishing to see who's going to be slightly looking at the bait. And the bait can be everything and anything, because they understand what your shadows are. So whatever's hiding in the shadows that you're not really looking at, they can use that to bait you, because it's an unconscious thing that you want under the shadows that can be used. So I can't go into the baiting mechanism because that could take 4 hours of me explaining all the different types of bait. But we don't need to know about that. You need to just know that this is an actual technique. Hooking someone, hook, line and sinker is quite an incredible technique. And what I want to say is the sinker, when we talk about the sinker is that's the part that actually starts to take somebody down. It makes them sink from the vibration that they are down into a lower vibration. So that's what I mean by a sinker. It actually, if someone hooks you and cords you and then sinks you, it's because they've hooked you with a program, which we're going to talk about in a moment. The cord is there, so it's draining you as well. And, of course, that's going to sink your vibration. So that's where hook, line and sinker comes in. Now, negative forces use this, but also positive souls use this technique as well. And like I said, where the best example of this, where I see it being used, is in marketing techniques. Now, there's underground marketing, sort of strategies that people use. There's all sorts of, things you can go and learn to, learn about the mind and how to manipulate the mind so you can sell better and stuff like that. All of these techniques are basically using negative techniques in order to manipulate. So I see it all the time in marketing. I see spiritual leaders using this technique unconsciously, trying to hook and bait people into buying their stuff. And it's a really, really tricky thing, because once you start using a technique that negative forces use, they're going to try and come and make you their ally. They're going to try and come and make you a deal, you know what I mean? So that's all I can really say about that, is just, you know, whenever it comes to marketing your work, don't go looking for marketing techniques. Market from your soul. I do believe that that anyone who's conscious and is especially working with spirit in any way and working with the divine, you cannot use techniques to manipulate someone to buy your product or your services. The more in alignment you are, the more your work will spread, no matter what it is, you know what I mean? So it's really important to be really aware that if you hear of some marketing technique, or someone tells you like a little technique that, you know, gets people to, like, convinces them to buy something from you or something like that, to remember that those techniques are not worth trying, because you're going to actually just create a lot of negative energy behind you, and you're going to get a lot of karmic debt, and you'll never see your greatness that way. You just never will. Follow your internal thing. The new spiritual way to do business won't make sense to people. It won't make business sense, but it will make spiritual sense. And that is how we're going to change the world. Lifespan. No matter who the originator of the cord, it can last for lifetimes, and it can be hiding deep in someone's inner world. It will usually show up in a reading if the cord is from this lifetime, but if it's from a past life, it can be hiding until that cord is highlighted, and then you'll find it. If the originator of the cord is negative forces of any kind, then these cords can hide, although with this type of reading clearing, we're usually finding them. But we can't assume we'll find everything at once. If the cord or cords are creating an issue at the point of reading, then you should find it. So when it comes to cords, if it's this lifetime, I'm pretty sure you're going to find it. If it's from, you know, like a positive soul or even a negative soul, you should find it. If the cord is from a past life, sometimes it's harder to find, but if it's highlighted and creating any issue at that time when you're reading for them, you will find it. So when it comes to darker forces, cords hide better. When it comes to negative forces, they are able to hide them deeper and under energetic layers. But with this, the way that I've designed this reading, I still think you're going to find it. But the reason I'm being a little bit cautious of saying that is because it does depend on your ability and your integrity. Because like I have said many, many times, the level of information and the clarity of information that you receive in the records can only ever match your integrity. So for somebody, you know, with really high integrity and is really in alignment to how they think and how they feel and what they do, then that person's going to pick up these types of things so much clearer. You know, someone who's not as tightly in alignment is not going to pick up these types of finer detailed stuff. They're just not going to get the same clarity and the same detail, you know. So when it comes to things that can hide, someone who is really in alignment and full of integrity, they're going to be able to find, you know, really minute details, and they're going to find things that are hiding so much quicker than someone who's not as tight in alignment. So that's the reason I'm a little bit more cautious of when I'm saying this sort of stuff, because I understand that it depends on the reader as well. So, and it depends on your alignment based on, you know, how clear the reading is. So those types of things will play into it. But like I said, I'm designing this so in a way where you really should be picking up a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's only things that are a lot more, have a lot more ability to hide, that you will find it a little bit harder to pick up if you're not reading at a massive, you know, sort of in alignment type of way, where you're at a level that is allowing that type of fine-tuned and fine detailed information to be picked up. So that is a process, you know, like the things that I pick up now compared to when I first started is hugely different, because, you know, when I first started doing this work, obviously, you know, learning about how energy works in a more detailed way allowed me to become more and more in alignment, which allowed my work to get more and more finely tuned and more, you know, sort of like fine detailed. So it's a process. It's a process. And doing this type of work really helps you be more in alignment, because you're seeing the energetic results of what happens when you're not in alignment. So it kind of really helps you, make you walk in alignment, faster and more kind of tighter in a way. So it's going to help. But when it comes to finding them, I can't guarantee when it comes to the things that are more susceptible to hiding, or more likely to hide, I should say. Now let's have a look at hooks. Hooks are energetic tools that are used to influence a positive soul by placing a program inside the hook to allow the originator of the hook to influence the emotional or mental body of another soul, while also harnessing vital force energy from the hook. So hooks are basically still able to harness vital force energy like cords can, but the difference is the hooks actually have programs running in the hook. So cords don't actually run programs, but hooks do. The hook won't drain vital force energy the same way as a cord can. Cords are much more efficient at draining vital force energy, but hooks are still quite good at it. But the bonus with the hook, as far as negative forces are concerned, is it actually runs a program as well. I would say that 90% of the time that I find a hook in someone, I also find a cord attached to the hook. So the originator has more control and influence of the person, although you can find a hook without a cord. Hooks are used by both positive and negative souls, as well as negative forces. If a positive soul uses hooks as a way to control, that soul can start to turn into a negative soul due to the impact of the hooks. Because everything you do to others, you also do to yourself, and there's no way around that. Now, when it comes to what I just said, it's really important to remember that once again, if somebody starts just using hooks and they haven't kind of used it before, they're not going to turn into a positive soul quickly. But what I mean by, positive souls who use hooks, what I've found with positive souls that use hooks is I've found that most of the time they've been using it most of their life. If a positive soul is using hooks and cords, the chances are they've been using that technique for a very long time, and they will be getting close to becoming negatively charged, becoming more negatively charged than positively charged. Because hooks, if you're a positive soul using hooks in others, you're doing like I said, what you do to someone else, you do to yourself. So if somebody's hooking somebody else, they're creating so much damage within their own self. They're also running the same program within themselves as well. So they're really buckling themselves. And I find that people who do this a lot to people, and they just create energetic damage so quickly. So that's kind of what I mean by, if you read for somebody and they're, and their partner, and you find they've got lots of hooks from their partner, the chances are that partner, if they've been using this sort of technique for a long time, they're just not going to be a very positive person. They still might be a positive soul, but they won't be a very positive person. They will be starting to get to that stage of being more negatively charged than positively charged. But in saying that, I do know that, some people start using these techniques later on in life due to, sometimes just having a marriage breakup and going through, some massive stuff can cause someone to try and start hooking into the other partner, through a breakup. And that's not something they've used before. So sometimes people use hooks and cords under certain situations, and they'll do it for a little bit of time, but then they'll stop doing it. And, I find once again that positive souls who do this, and it's only kind of like a one-off, or it's only something that just started to happen, they usually course correct themselves quite quickly, because they can feel that it doesn't feel good. And even though they don't consciously know what they've done, they start to move towards, moving away from the partner. Just say if it's a marriage that's just broken up and there's kids involved, usually I find hooks and cords start, being thrown around in those sorts of scenarios. There's a lot of, emotions and stuff going on. And when the family unit breaks down and the person separate, usually the hooks and cords will start happening, and it's the first time that person's ever kind of used them. And they'll use them for a while, and sometimes this can go on for a year when it comes to breakups. But I usually find that positive souls who haven't used this technique before, they will naturally, even if it's kind of over a year, they will naturally start to dissolve that and start to move away once they've kind of moved through accepting the relationship and moving into a more forgiving sort of space. Now, that's not to say that it will always happen. Sometimes people can never be hooking somebody. They'll go through a breakup with a partner, and the family might dissolve. And, you know, I'll use a male for an example. That male might, you know, constantly be trying to hook and cord the ex-partner or the children just because they're so freaking, you know, like feeling really crappy about the family unit breaking down and want that person back. So those sorts of situations I can see sometimes lasting for a year or two, you know, and sometimes that person never stops trying to do it. And that's when they have more chance of becoming more and more negative. But sometimes after a year or two of playing those kind of tricks, and it just gets so old and draining that the person just kind of like changes focus. They start to let go and accept for how it is, and the cords and hooks stop. So, well, we've got some really weird light going on. Sorry about that. But that's how it can play out. And I'm really hoping, I really hope that I'm explaining this properly, because there's so many intricate different ways, and I'm trying to give you as many different ways that it could play out. And remember that you don't have to remember all of this. I'm just giving you as much information as I can to try and make it, you know, kind of make as much sense as I can. And this type of stuff, you know, these intricate little more details, you might not even worry about, you know, until you've kind of done maybe, you know, 100 different clearings, and then all of a sudden you'll have a deeper understanding of how things play out, and then you might go over this information again and get deeper, more gold out of the information and start to use it again. So please, you know, when it comes to all these overwhelming different types of ways that this can happen and different types of ways that this can happen, don't get overwhelmed. Just remember that this information, you know, it's just there. So, you know, in time to come, you might go over it again and you might get different layers of gold. So don't get overwhelmed, but just understand I'm trying to give you as many different scenarios and how it can play out as possible. So this is the reason why out of alignment sale tactics can create a person to take many deals unconsciously from negative forces, because the person is already out of alignment by using the hook, line and sinker type of sale tactics that negative forces find easy targets. As soon as someone starts manipulating words to hook people in, they are playing with darker energy without even realizing it. So this is just something that's, you know, just really, really good to know, and good to know for clients as well. If you're working with someone who, you know, does have products and services out there, and they are, you know, using techniques to manipulate people into buying their stuff, it's really important to know that, you know, this is the type of stuff that creates negative forces to start trying to make deals with somebody and trying to buy them. So, you know, just be really aware, and be really aware when you're out there and someone's selling something to you. Just really feel into the language and, you know, what sort of techniques are they using. That's not to say that everybody that, you know, is out there selling stuff is using these techniques, but it is just something to be aware of, because I have noticed a lot that people aren't aware. They're not aware. They think, oh, this is the way to sell and this is how she does it, so this is the way that I should do it. But it's really important to always, you know, really tune in to when you're buying something, or if you're selling something, to really tune in and stay in alignment, because you don't want to try and manipulate anybody into doing anything. So you just want to be really careful that you're not getting manipulated and that you're not manipulating other people when it comes to, you know, putting your offerings out into the world, or people offering their things to you. Family members do this to each other, and I have worked for many couples who actually try and control each other in underlying manipulating ways and hook and cord each other constantly back and forth to get their needs met. The energetic mess they get themselves into can be extreme, where the dysfunction becomes their normal due to the hooking and cording. So like I said, positive and negative souls, use, hooks as well as cords, but hooks to get around things. And sometimes people do that, regularly, and some people do it as a one-off thing. So it depends on what side of the spectrum they are on. If they're a positive person, if they're a positive soul, they still might not be on the extreme side. They might be closer to the darker side. So they might be getting closer and closer, down to that side of the scale. So a positive soul doesn't mean that they don't do negative things and don't use negative techniques. So just always remember that. But when it comes to family members and couples, some people, I just see a lot of family members and a lot of couples using this as a way they live. They're constantly hooking and courting each other just to get their needs met. So sometimes you will have clients who literally might show up with 5 or 6 or 10 hooks and cords from their partner, and if you do a clearing for the partner, you might find just as many in them because they're just doing it to each other. And like I said, their dysfunction becomes their normal, and it's actually a really messy situation to get themselves into. From the outside, their lives might look fine, but and they think it's okay as well, because they've just got so used to getting their needs met through constant manipulation. Instead of just owning and asking and being really straight with their needs, they're constantly getting their needs met, like I said, through manipulation, and this ends up hooks and cords all over the place. Like cords, hooks are found in chakras, and the program the hook is running will affect the chakra either at a mental body level or an emotional body level, depending on if it's placed in the emotional body or the mental body. Hooks can be created from any distance, and you don't need the person to be around you, and you don't even need to know the person. Like I said, even sales tactics can hook us if we're roped into buying something we don't need and is out of alignment for us. Attaching mechanism. In order for a hook to be received, there has to be some resonance to the program the hook is running. If we have any resonance to the program, our energy body could buy into the program and accept the hook. If the hook is from a positive soul, then this will be formed out of the need to control the other person. Many positive people still try and control others as a form of love, and most people use this energetic technique when it comes to close, intimate relationships. The only way not to allow a hook from other positive souls is to create strong energetic boundaries through deep inner work and self-love. If we've cleaned up the shadow that creates unhealthy relationship dynamics to form, then we will not be able to be hooked. If the hook is from a negative soul, then this will be formed from the need to control or to create interference, as well as to feed off vital force energy. The only way not to allow hooks from negative souls is the same as we just spoke about, through creating strong energetic boundaries through deep inner work and self-love. Otherwise, our shadow is the place where all these negative energies and forces get to play and attach without us even knowing. If the hook is from negative forces, then it will also be formed to control, create interference, and to feed from. The only way not to allow hooks from negative forces is to become a next level human who does the shadow work and remembers how to use energy without having underlying manipulations running in the background. This plays out as presenting as a nice person, but in your mind, you are judging and manipulating. The results in a person. Depending on who the originator of the hook is and what program is operating, what chakra is attached to, and if it's in the emotional or mental body, will determine the results in a person. The programs in the hook can range from low programs that create low disturbances, or it can be running on a high, and this can create huge levels of distortion within the emotional or mental body grid. I've seen hooks play out in many ways. For example, once the hook is in someone's emotional body, they can start playing out the program and become emotionally overloaded. They may start freaking out and tripping hard within their emotional body. It's like they feel the program is their story and their truth, and they can play out anywhere from slightly affecting their emotions to blowing circuits in their emotional body grid and the person having an emotional breakdown. When the hook is in someone's mental body, the person will take the program on and start to adjust their thoughts around the program running. It can range from a low program that creates low disturbances, or it can be running on high, and this can create huge levels of mental distortion. The person may start feeling a bit crazy as the program starts to hijack their thoughts, and they can start to act out the program even though it's completely different to their truth. I've had people close down their businesses and walk away from their passions due to hooks in their mental body, running a program of failure. After clearing the hooks, they can't believe what they were thinking. Their thoughts can become so powerful they don't even hear other people's thoughts and advice around whatever they are tripping out on. It can be hard watching someone go through this, and obviously it doesn't make sense to the people watching it all play out. So an extreme case, but one that I want to use just to highlight, I had someone come to me that was basically just going through a mental, crazy period. They had closed and walked away from their business despite all of their family trying to convince them otherwise, and it was all due to a hook and a program of failure that was running from an ex. So it was a really extreme case, because the program was so on high, and it was in the mental body grid, like I said. So this person was hijacked. His thoughts were hijacked, and he felt and thought like a complete failure, and just wanted to walk away from the whole thing. Now, after we cleared these things, he really could not believe that he'd actually sold his business, that he actually sold his business. That is how much that this hook, being extremely on high and extremely powerful, had the ability to hijack his thoughts. So, this is not like a common thing to come up against, because most of the time hooks and cords are on, a low kind of vibration. They're not on high. To have high voltage, it takes a lot of vital force energy from the originator. So a lot of people just don't have that level of motivation to create such an intense kind of, energetic thing, because it takes vital force energy. So it's not common to have this type of high intensity hook in someone, but you never know. Over your lifetime of doing this work, or over your course of, doing it for yourself, you never know what you can find. And I wanted to use that example as just showing you what an extreme case something on high can actually do. Lifespan. Hooks can be from lifetimes, and these things can hide very well unless they're highlighted at the time of reading. Although the more sensitive you become and the more skilled you are at reading energy, you will find them. This is the reason why you can have two people read for the same person, and one person may find more information and more negative energy because that person's ability to read energy became more detailed, and so can pick up more. I find that people can think they're super sensitive, but unless you start actually doing this work on clients for years, you'll never know how sensitive you can really become, because the ability to read energy becomes more and more fine print, and you can get really down to the most minute types of information, and that's when it becomes amazing. We are capable of hearing information in every frequency clearly, like having a conversation with a person. The amount of detail we pick up depends on the shadow work we've done, because the lighter we become, the clearer we interpret the information. Now, just an important thing to know about after clearing hooks and cords. If the hook or cord is from a positive soul, then clearing the hooks and cords can allow the relationship to change and become more pleasant and evenly powered. And it also gives the originator of the hook and cord to reconnect to Divine Source rather than steal others' energetic resources. This, however, is not always the case, as the originator of the hooks and cords can react in a negative way if they are used to having some form of power over the person or relies on their vital force energy. They could disconnect from the person altogether since they're no longer getting their food source, or they could do the opposite and start visiting more or trying to be around them more, emailing, texting, etc., so they can try and re-establish some kind of energetic connection. They may try and pick a fight or try and use guilt or blame or find another opening to make another attachment. This is where the saying, "they were trying to bait me into an argument," comes from, as we can feel this type of energy when someone is fishing for an argument, and this is the classic example of someone trying to hook or cord you. The most common time I find people with lots of hooks and cords is after people separate, like I said, after spending years together as a couple, especially with kids. It can be a time when hurt and fear is running high and power struggles are at their highest, and it's not uncommon to find many hooks and cords during this time and for years after. If you have clients in this situation, it's important for them to practice non-reacting during interactions. They will need to do some inner work to let go of any need to please, fix, conform, or anything else that keeps them playing out this energetic game. When we stop reacting and start responding, we become unhookable and uncordable. If the hook or cord is from a negative soul, then you can almost guarantee the originator will react negatively and will also either drop away out of the person's life or fight for an energetic reconnection. The difference between the originator being a negative soul instead of a positive soul is that the negative soul may try and use other ways to gain the energetic attachment back. So the person will have to be aware that in order for this to change, they must start responding and not reacting, and this takes a lot of inner clearing and healing. If the hook or cord is from negative forces, then the person will have to do whatever it takes to become more conscious and aware of energy and what choices they are making. There is no way we can get away with staying asleep anymore, and the process of staying awake in all of our choices is not easy, but it's one that is truly necessary if we want to be sovereign beings. So I know that is a lot of information about hooks and cords, and I've broken it down and I've tried to take this information and put it into a logical framework so you can understand. And I've tried to show you, kind of from many different angles and different originators of both hooks and cords. So I hope I've made that simple to understand. But I also want to remind you that this is complex stuff. It's intricate. So please don't expect to watch this video once and then feel like, oh, no, I need more information and I can't understand it all, because this is just going to be part of the journey of doing the work. Once you start doing the work and you start working with people with hooks and cords and you start having the interactions and you start hearing the befores and afters, then this information becomes more and more and more and more solid, because I've recognized there's no way for me to take so many years of doing this work every single day, and I don't even know how many thousands of hands-on healings I've done, plus how many records I've read. We're talking about so many years, and I've been living this every single day for over 7 years, full time, all the time, full time, living, doing this work. So the comprehension of all these videos, you are not going to watch the videos once and comprehend it, and it's just not going to happen. If you want to fully comprehend everything, it's going to take layers of watching them while doing work for others and yourself. So I just wanted to say that, because So when it comes to these types of hooks and cords, you don't have to know every single thing and everything I've just spoken about. I just wanted to give you the framework and give you as much information as possible. When it comes to doing the clearing, we're going to have certain questions we ask. You're going to get the answers and you're going to clear. You're not going to need to know all this sort of stuff in order to do the work. It's only if you want to really start comprehending it so you can, kind of help other people, understand stuff better. That's the reason I'm giving you so much information. So don't stress out about having to know all of the different hooks and originators and how it plays out, because that's just extra information that helps you expand when you start doing the actual physical work with people.